It is indeed a pleasure to be here to chat with you about some of the exciting opportunities that we see in the digital economy, digital marketplace. And every time I have a presentation, I try to think of something that I can leave people with. What's the one takeaway? And I think I might have left it here in the title this time. When you look at it, mobile, the K in computing. So, well, there's no K in computing. And for those of us that have learned English with difficulty, that's a reason why I'm an engineer and didn't do well in the arts environment, all those special rules. Words like knie, knife, and all those things caused me big problems. And I was always reminded that K is silent and that you just say that word. As we start to look at the computing environment increasingly today and moving forward in the future, this idea of mobile computing, I gotta tell you, the mobile's silent. It's just computing. And we're going to start to see that just disappear. And hopefully this morning we can show you some of those examples, some of those use cases, talk about the opportunities, see what happening in that environment, talk a little bit about what the opportunity is to work with industry. What are some of those channels? What are some of those things? Look at how we can work here in Canada and project our know-how, project our excellence around the world. So I always start my presentation with inviting people to let their minds wander. We're busier now than ever before. When I talk to business people, their heads down in email, just answer the email, just get the job done. I need that metric, I need that statistic, I need to publish that paper, I need to get the research done, all those things. Let's take this opportunity to sit back and imagine. That's what this workshop's about, is to take back and sit back and say, what's the realm of the possible? Where are the avenues, where's the opportunities? How do I look local, how do I look global? So we'll start off a little bit with trends. Look at some of the transformational trends that we see in the marketplace. Mobility, ubiquitous connectivity. We talked a little bit about that. We'll explore that further this morning as we look at the changes in connectivity, the dynamics of that environment. Social, transforming communication, transforming business. Not only during the ice storm, we see Department of Homeland Security now saying, look, when there's a crisis, don't pick up your cell phone. Use Twitter and Facebook to let people know you're safe. Did the engineers of Twitter and Facebook understand that they're a critical infrastructure? Not sure they did, but it's kind of interesting to see that happening. Interesting to see the hashtag fails that are happening out in the business world as people aren't paying attention and they're getting slammed in the marketplace. It's also interesting to see the good things that are happening there. Cloud, providing that anywhere access to information. Hopefully we did mystify the cloud a little bit this morning, because cloud, we as technology people use short forms. And people then try to package those short forms in a particular place. We love to organize things as people. Ruthless organizers, we hear cloud, we automatically think, okay, that's a photo share. Well, is it? We'll demystify that a little bit further. Big data, large amounts of data, diverse sets of data, different types of data, changing the way that we look at the world, changing the way that we do things, changing science. These are fundamental changes that we see happening in the marketplace, happening to our lives, happening to individuals. Changes in the computing ecosystem, this idea of pervasive displays, and finally natural user interfaces. We see an explosion of devices out there. We see another 20 billion devices coming up onto the web within the next 2 years. We see that just accelerating with new sensors, new devices, the Internet of Things that are out there. So a lot of people talk about the death of the PC, and they point at us in Redmond and us in Ottawa, us in Microsoft, and say, death of the PC, you guys are going down. Well, okay, fine. My resume's out there. Look at LinkedIn. No, just kidding. So we get it. We see it. We see this change into the many device world. We see that there are a variety of different devices that people will interface and interact with. We see people to devices, people to people, devices to devices. So we see powerful system-on-chip, processing units, growth, data sensors. Did you know that there's a personal health information system out there called Health Vault that connects with over 50 different medical devices? Peak flow meters for asthmatics, glucometers, weight scales. I'll never buy one of those things, but a weight scale that connects up to Health Vault to allow you to connect up to things. So we see a variety of different devices that people connect up with. In-vehicle systems, great Canadian success stories around in-vehicle systems. If you look at CES, you see the refrigerators, you'll see the washer and dryer. I've got a washer and dryer. It's Wi-Fi connected. It still doesn't pick up my clothes. Still frustrating. Not too much I can do with that, but it's really, really interesting. So we see many, many devices that are connected. And these devices aren't always tethered. They need to communicate. All right, so those are the devices. What are we going to get them to do? Well, a couple examples here. We have the internet-connected fridge. They now have internet-connected egg trays. So if you're at the grocery store, did I buy eggs or did I not? Do I need eggs? You can now check. Kind of interesting. I thought that was a useful use of things, other than having it complain to you that the door's open. But we have internet-connected fridges, connected vehicles. So I'm working with Transport Canada, Ministry of Transport Ontario, and Quebec government to look at connected vehicles and figure out what this means to the 401 trade corridor. Because if you look at the amount of trade that goes across the Windsor-Detroit border at any one day, $300 million worth of merchandise goes in either direction. It's a lot of goods that goes across there. Wouldn't it be great if we could connect that up? It's a lot of commercial type applications where you know the driver, you know how long the truck's been on the road, how much the driver's slept, you know individual item on a box, on a pallet in the truck that's been moving from one place to another. Imagine what it could do to the economy if you didn't have to wait 4 hours to get across the border and you could just drive through and wave, because everybody knew what was going on, that you were assured of that happening. What about the consumer space, connected cars? So we hear a lot about the self-driving cars. I know for myself, not quite there yet, not quite comfortable with it. But what about coordinated cruise control? Right? You're driving from Moncton to St. John, snow's blowing, you still got to get there. What if your car could drive you safely at speeds? So you're driving, but it just gives you a little bit of assist. So talking about coordinated cruise control, collision avoidance, at intersections. In Vancouver, they've got what's called the Vancouver Area Smart Trek. That's that circle, that architecture diagram there. We won't go into details on all of that, but it talks about a smart transportation system. And so intelligent transportation systems, so that you know when the container comes off the ship from the Pacific Rim, what's in the container, you can put it on the truck, and then you can ship it around all of the Western Canada and United States, because Canada's become a disembarkation point of choice for Western North America. I never knew that. It's actually Calgary. They ship it all to Calgary first, take it apart, and then ship it across Canada. So it's kind of interesting how they do that. Cognitive radio networks, smart meters, a number of different devices out there. So as we're starting to look at the computing environment, as we're starting to think about this new world of computing, let's look at all those different form factors. Let's look at all those different opportunities. Fundamentally, it's changing how we interact with computers. Today, we're accustomed to telling the computer what to do. Give me that stat, give me that information, show me that chart. It's going to get to a point where it works on our behalf and starts to say, hey, John, remember you've got this appointment. Or tells my wife, hey, you know what, Laurel? John's late today. You don't put the dinner in the oven till then, or you don't expect him to make you dinner until he gets home, that type of thing. But making those decisions on your behalf, being able to collect that information, be able to share that information in a privacy and a security-friendly way as well. You don't necessarily want to have everybody know where you're located at any one particular time. Perhaps it's just, hey, John's going to be 5 minutes late, to be able to have that sentiment and context. So changing the way that we interact with the computing environment, changing the way that we interact with the environment. So we're seeing computers now interact with people, with data, helping us gain more sense of our lives. Anybody drive a Prius in this room? Usually there's one. Okay, we've all probably driven behind a Prius as they're leaving from an intersection. What's one of those things that we notice when we drive behind a Prius at the intersection? They have a very measured departure rate. Kind of go on, take off easily, gradually as they go off. For the most part, why they do that is because there's huge competitions for Prius drivers. They're trying to get the most mileage out of every drop of fuel. So they've got this great display screen right there in the middle, and it shows, hey, green, green, red, the engine's turned on again. You gotta step back. And so now all of a sudden it's changing behavior. It's giving people a little nudge, letting them know what's going on. I rented a car recently and the fuel mileage gauge said instantaneous fuel mileage, and then it also said best score, which I thought was brilliant. Right? It's the gamification of our world. And so when we look at the games environment, a lot of times people say, you know what, games, that's just fun stuff, it's pastimes, it's entertainment. No, gamification really has societal impact and changes the way that people work. So much so that when you look at the philosophies around nudge, the UK government, which was cited a few times earlier this morning, has actually brought that team in to find out what are some of those social cues, those little nudges that we can give people. Maybe there's a competition on street by street to see who uses the least power around the holiday time, because you've switched to LED lights instead of incandescent lights, right? So to gamify those worlds. So some interesting environments and interesting opportunities. We see with some of the phones, this idea of calorie monitors. I'm living truth of watching those calories. 6 months ago, I started watching my intake. I've lost 50 pounds just by using those apps, mediating my activities, being able to see what was going on. So changing that way that we look at the world around us and being able to have more insight into what's happening. We also see that interaction changing from the traditional keyboard and mouse now to some of those things we're accustomed to working with each other, that people aspect. So we see speech recognition. If I could speak, it'd be great. We see handwriting recognition. We see single touch. It's now changing into what we call the natural user interface. More natural interactions, removing that learning curve so that you're now able to pick things up and be able to interact with it. Where we've probably all seen the 2-year-old that's familiar with the slate or tablet device going up to the large screen TV and being frustrated because they can't get the channels to change by simply waving in front of it, right? Brilliant design, brilliant user interface to understand, hey, here are some gestures that work, and how do they go across? So we see gestures, situational awareness, giving people the information based upon context. Knowing that, hey, you know what, John can't fill out his taxes on this device. He simply does not have the eye power to do it. Right? Knowing that, no, I'm going to show him, it's perhaps just his return status that I can show him on there. So understanding the context of that conversation, understanding the physical interaction, sensors around it, completing tasks. So the look ahead spell check, the ability to think about where that next place is that you might want to go after that, based upon the context of the conversation. And it's pretty exciting because these things are finding themselves into some unique environments. When we brought out the Connect system, we thought, we're pretty proud of ourselves. That, hey, this is pretty cool. It's pretty cool for the gaming environment. And then all of a sudden, people start to hack it. And one of the people that started to hack it were some Linux developers at Sunnybrook Medical in Toronto. And so they took the thing apart, they connected it up to a system, and they started to use it in the operating room. So when you think about the surgeon in the operating room looks at their foils, looks at the x-rays before they go in, tries to make a mental image of that, then goes into the operating room, scrubs all up, goes into the operating room, does their operation. If they've forgotten something or want to double check something, they have to take off the gloves, they go back outside of the operating room, look at the foils, figure out what was wrong, scrub again, go back in, losing precious minutes, sometimes 10, 15 minutes in order to do that. By using the Connect, they could put the foils on the screen, and by a simple wave, they could have the images in front of them. Fundamentally changing how they did their business, changing how they interact with the computing environment. So in our labs, we're trying out a whole bunch of different things. One of them is 3D imagery without glasses. So we have a display that tracks people's head movement and is able to adjust the display to have 3D sensing, 3D vision with the use of that technology, and in multiple people as well. So not just one person sees 3D, you can track the heads of multiple people to be able to have that sense of what's happening. Microsoft Tell Me is voice recognition. It's a cloud-based service. You gain access to that through the phone. So as we start to look at some of these interaction points, we're used to mobile and the touch and the text side of things, the voice and the voice technology, the transcription, the translation tools. Some of those application interfaces are already there to develop and build upon. And we actually had somebody here locally working with the Tell Me service to do a tour of St. John. So an auditory tour of St. John to be able to walk people through using the Tell Me technologies. We have surfaces, multiple devices, multiple areas. I have a little video later on that will show this idea of pervasive displays. So to stop thinking about the computing platform as an individual device and start to look across a variety of common everyday things as being the environment where things, where computing is conducted. A couple other interesting research capabilities. As I was coming in this morning, my phone was in my coat pocket. And I'm in the car, and all of a sudden it pings. Okay. Try to get a hold of it, pull it out. By the time I got it out, my hands were cold, I was cold, the phone was cold, didn't work. Well, guys at Microsoft Research are trying different interfaces so that you can actually enable and do commands through clothing. Now they can come up with a better name. It's called Pocket Touch. But they are working so that you can actually do gestures and be able to come through and control these mobile devices through multiple layers of clothing. Another one where they project surfaces or project computing surfaces onto any arbitrary surface. Now, this looks particularly ugly today. It looks like that camera on a shoulder mount. It's kind of big, but at least it allows you now to have other compute interaction surfaces in different environments. So really changing the way that things that you interact with the environment. The other part is having the computer understand context, understand the audience that it's speaking with, understanding the community. Call that semantic computing. Contextual awareness is giving the computing environment a sense of what you're doing at any one particular time. Are you occupied? Are you preoccupied? Are you driving? Are you sitting in a room where you have a large surface? Are there other people in the room? Be able to have that conversation. Taking complex sets of data and distilling them into what's meaningful for the individual. So example here on the cell phone is a use case where a family goes into the doctor. So we've all gone to the doctor, gone to the emergency room, and the emergency room is a series of waiting rooms, right? You come in, you get triaged, then you go into one waiting room, then you go into another waiting room, you can see expert after expert, and you're going along. And a lot of times, this is rather opaque. And some of us, perhaps the more nefarious of us, would go out in the hallway, try to grab our file and try to read through, and what do we get? One, we can't understand the scribbles that are there. Two, even if we did, we wouldn't understand where we are in the process. The intent around this tool set was to take all that complex medical jargon, the medical knowledge, and distill it into something that a parent could understand. So that they could look at their phone and say, hey, it's going to be 5 more minutes. Hey, everything's looking good. Everything's on schedule. Here's the interim results. Here's what I can share. So to distill that complex information, bring it down. We have a researcher at Dalhousie, Derek Tittensor, who works with global ecology, global ecosystems. And so they are able to track billions of organic elements within, let's say, an ocean. Right? So they can look at fish, they can look at whales, and all those different components of an ecosystem. The focus of the research is to take all that broad information, billions of data points, that big data, and put it down into something that can be displayed on a cell phone, or perhaps taught to a kindergartner. So to do that translation. And semantic computing, contextual awareness allows us to do that. It was mentioned that we now have a camera in our hand. This camera provides us some cool tools. We see that changing insurance agencies and insurance bureaus. As you can go in and take a photo exactly of what's happening at any one particular time. Everyone has a photo. We're seeing big changes in international affairs. We actually see where people are on Twitter and saying, look, I'm at an uprising here. Someone will tweet back, send us photos. BBC does that on a regular basis to share that information in real time. We have the ability now to put an overlay on top of this world, so augmented reality. So be able to position arbitrary information. Now, on the Nokia platform, there's an application called Here that shows you advertising, it shows you location-based data. But you can imagine taking this to perhaps the Bell telephone repair person. If you've ever looked at one of those pedestals at the end of a community, all the wires look the same color. But being able to have an overlay on that to be able to show that individual, hey, this is where you need to fix that wire. Here's the circuit that's in trouble, is perhaps a useful application. Think of city construction, what's under the road at any one particular time, where we're going, and augmenting that reality. To one point, this frightens people, where you can almost have a surgeon having the computing platform in their hand and saying, no, don't cut there, move over 2 inches. A lot of people get nervous around that. But as you look at how the millennials are working with their technology, they're not remembering those rote education lessons. They're saying, hey, I can get it on my phone. I don't need that anymore. How does that change then our work environment? And what type of rules and regulations do we have to have in place for that, so that they actually know what they're up to instead of having the computer direct them all the time? Another great opportunity in mobile commerce. changing the way that we pay for things, changing the way that we do business. One of the most interesting events that I've seen is this idea of changing all your phones into the point-of-sale terminal through the use of Square, or there's one from Intuit. It's a number of different connection points that you can put in there. I know that when you look at some of the industries, the food truck industry in North America has really exploded because of this capability. Instead of now having to just have pocket change in order to buy your fries or your poutine, now you can go out and get like gourmet meals. Most commonly in Vancouver, where they have, it seems like gourmet food trucks that are out there, and you're paying $20 for your meal. These things have been enabled through that type of mobile commerce. We see near-field communication, changing the way that we interact with each other, to be able to bump things back and forth, to be able to do payments on presentation. And then we see virtual currencies. We've all been tracking the Bitcoin up and down, and certainly as recently as this week, people have been saying, look, the law might actually prevent it because of some ancient stamp law or stamp trading law. But here in Canada, a at-home gem is Mint Chip. So the Canada Mint came up with their own virtual currency. And it works like cash. It's anonymous. You can pass it back and forth. You can put it on a USB stick and share it back and forth. But it's tied to an actual currency. So it's not floating like Bitcoin. It's actually tied to negotiable currency. And they've had competitions for development of applications that use that currency. And we were quite pleased that the winner of the last contest was actually building on Windows Phone. So we were pleased that they were able to do that. One could argue that no one would be able to pay anybody because no one has Windows Phone, but we won't get into that. But so we see mobile commerce being a great environment and an opportunity. As we go down that path, trust and confidence in this environment is important. And sometimes, somewhere along the way, we've forgotten that this is a computer. Or maybe we haven't learned it yet, right? As we've moved from your candy bar to the smartphone. But we have a computer in its own right. If we think about this phone, 10 years ago, and think of the compute capacity that this has, where it would be found 10 years ago, you have multiple processors, lots of storage, lots of connectivity. That's a supercomputer 10, 15 years ago. Now we have a supercomputer in our hands. We need to be able to protect and safeguard that. Now, 12 years ago, Bill Gates took a look at the computing world and he said, look, trust and confidence in the computing world is critical, not only to our business, but it's critical to society. And he launched the Trustworthy Computing Initiative, where we build in security, privacy, accessibility, availability, and reliability into all our products that we deliver. It's now an international standard, our security development lifecycle, so an ISO standard of how to develop secure software. And it's being implemented by other companies around the world. And it's important that as we're developing in the mobile environment, that we take those lessons and we build them into our mobile environment. There's one platform out there, 100% of the top 100 applications have malware in them. Right? 100%, that's all of them. So we need to consider that as we go across. We also need to consider the use of these mobile technologies in critical infrastructures. I'm part of the multi-sectoral committee on interdependencies at Public Safety, where we work with the energy sector, the water sector, the food sector, ICT, the 10 critical infrastructure sectors, and I now chair the working group for cybersecurity. And one of the things we've recognized is, look, these devices are critical. Home automation tools are critical. How do we safeguard and control them? There's great opportunities, I think, in development there. We also have to recognize, I apologize that this is an eye chart, that there are a variety of different technologies there. We have Wi-Fi, we have Bluetooth, we have RFID, NFC, Zigbee, ThingSquare, Weightless, white space radios. We have a whole bunch of different communication techniques and technologies that beneath that. We also have a whole bunch of different business models. As we're starting to look at these mobile technologies, these computing technologies, let's appreciate the business models that support it. Because if the business doesn't hold, probably won't sell their technologies. Some great technologies were out there, and we know that they've come and go. Beta versus VHS, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Right? So we have to understand the business models that are behind it so that we can then use them in an and type fashion. It's not an either or, it's an and type fashion. And we need to consider the global approaches. Now, I especially like this This is a Wi-Fi antenna on a mountain in Venezuela. Anyone guess how far that Wi-Fi is actually transmitted from this mountain? 382 kilometers. So imagine that, 382 kilometers projecting Wi-Fi in the mountains of Venezuela. All right, so that's kind of interesting. But is it being used? Well, there's a great case study a lot of business schools and medical schools take about the Aravind eye clinics. You want to hear about the Aravind eye clinics? Really revolutionized how they do eye surgeries in India. So they do cataract surgeries, and they've almost been the Henry Ford of eye surgeries. Right? So they've created an assembly line. They've done over 4 million surgeries, over 285,000 surgeries last year on patients in the region. They have 5 or 6 clinics in between the mountains in India. They use these antennas to share information amongst the clinics. It's a simple Wi-Fi router and then a TV antenna that they got from the source to connect up. So taking a look at the frugal innovation that's possible in those regions. So we talk about the 20% landmass in Canada that is broadband covered, and we start to look at our remote regions. Do we have opportunities then to look at frugal innovation, to build out our infrastructure? Perhaps we have a hub and spoke model where we provide high-speed access to a government building, and then we fire it out from there and allow then that baseline model to be had. So it's important as we start to look at this space that we look worldwide at opportunities to embrace technologies, but also to share that information outwards. Because our disadvantaged in Canada have the same challenges as the disadvantaged in Africa or India or in China, the next great marketplaces. In Africa, Microsoft is working with partners in the telcos to bring white space broadband to the regions that are not served by telecommunications plans. So with solar power and white space, we have 16 megabit per second broadband to towns without electricity. Now, I had a telco person poo-poo this and say, LTE has got 100 and so megabits, blah, blah, blah. So I've never been able to get that speed in LTE on my phone, first of all. Secondly, I can't get it there. So as we start to look at white space radios and the opportunities to share this Wi-Fi, the free Wi-Fi, perhaps there's a baseline that can be established, and then you have a pay-for service above that. We also need to recognize that these white space radios then change different business models as well. As we start to look internationally, we're working with Huawei to develop a white space phone. And so they're delivering a phone that works with these white space radios to be able to provide that connectivity. Also multiple SIMs. We have to remember that there's the different styles of economies that are in these regions. And so there's a more informal economy where people are using multiple SIM cards. They're sharing phones. I give somebody $5, they watch their watch as I do the 5-minute call, and then they give the phone back to me. So understanding those dynamics. These are connected to cloud, as was mentioned earlier. This is a picture of 1984 World's Fair. And the 1984 World's Fair had Nikola Tesla and Thomas Edison debating the merits of AC and DC power. Now, we think about power. We take power for granted, right? Plug in, and it's simply there, as we require it on demand. We pay for what we use, and it's just there. Cloud computing promises to provide us computing in the same style of electricity. It's just there. Plug it in, and we're off to the races. So we don't have to think about what's behind the scenes across the board. And so what's really, really interesting is, if we look back at 1894, what was the killer app for electricity? Street lighting. We were going to light up the streets of America. What do we use electricity for today? What are the things we take for granted? First one's refrigeration, but then we also have medical, we have communications, we have computing, all these different environments. Because you can make electricity, it's easy to use as plugging in the wall. It offered up all these other innovations and all these other opportunities. And so now we're on the cusp of that for cloud computing. Coupled with cloud computing is this idea of big data. Let me take you back in time. Again, we'll go back further. Wayne's World, we'll go back. Imagine medicine in the 1300s. Noteworthy events in the 1300s? The Black Plague. So if you're wandering around Europe in the 1300s, the Black Plague was something to be very, very afraid of. So let's say you all of a sudden started feeling not so well. Where would you go? You'd go to the barber. Exactly. First the cemetery, and then the barber would get you. You go to the barber, and the barber had limited tools. They'd have things like a board with spikes. They'd have blades. They'd have leeches. Why? Because they believed that the body was built upon bile, black bile, yellow bile, green bile, and you had some sort of imbalance. Well, you were probably doomed until the 1600s, when von Loveneck and Galileo started experimenting with the microscope. Can you imagine the first time they looked at a drop of blood under the microscope and said, hey, there's no bile here and whatsoever. What are these things? We can start to define platelets and white blood cells and red blood cells. It's pretty amazing. Now, for us, it's kind of like, John, microscope. I saw that when I was 3. I was amazed then, not so much now. All right. What about the Hubble telescope? Remember those first photos from the Hubble telescope? Seeing those galaxies, those nebulas, the photos. Seeing that's out there now. Every time I hear about another planet that's out there, I'm amazed. It's just, really, really stunning stuff. Really providing us a new perspective on the world. Saw this in Wired magazine. Now, this is a few years old now, this photo, but 141 aircraft paths in 24 hours across the United States. Never knew there were that many aircraft that flew across the United States. One endeavoring young man said, hey, that's kind of interesting. Built a routine that went to Sabre, that went to Expedia, that went to all the online booking systems. And he actually reverse engineered them. So that if you were traveling from New York to LA, he could tell you the best time to buy your ticket so you get the cheapest fare by being able to analyze and assess all that big data. Now, the truth of the matter is it's Tuesday. Buy your tickets Tuesday because families do their travel planning on the weekend and business does it on Mondays and Fridays. So Tuesday is the best day to buy your ticket, but be able to have that sense. There's a company in Toronto, DMTI, they looked at a challenge of trying to find the distance between every postal code in the province of Ontario. If they used traditional computing, it would take over 280 years to be able to do so. They did it in 6 days by using a small set of cores through the cloud. Be able to have business value, business information that was there. So all kind of interesting point-in-time type examples. Let's bring them all together. And I'm not sure we'll hear the audio on this, but again, the audio is not that critical to it. But let's take a look at a potential scenario.
Welcome to Johannesburg International Airport. Please approach the road to create your pickup zone.
So this video shows this idea of ubiquitous screens, compute platforms that aren't traditional compute platforms, machine translation, context setting, the ability to bring that information all together. What's really cool about this is each individual technology is available today, but not brought together in this consistent form. Because of time, I think I'll just cut it off there. You'll have the whole full video as part of the package that you'll be able to access. I do warn you, it'll be about 200 meg when you download it, so it'll be on the cloud someplace so that you can have a look. So get the chance to travel across Canada and take a look at the opportunities and talk with entrepreneurs and startups and governments across Canada. See here, me and my Chevy truck and my motorhome. We're a little bit frugal lately. Not really. So it talks about what Canada doing in this space. 2010, Canada led a very innovative consultation process on the digital economy. Everybody hear about that? Everybody contribute? A few of us. This is more than in any other room that I've been in. So that's great news. Bad news is it hasn't gone very far. But it was interesting because when you look at it, we had online consultation. We had a voting process. We had submissions where people could put ideas and then vote on those ideas. Now, the problem was the ideas with the most votes were on the front page, so they got more votes and more votes and more votes, but that's not here nor there. Minister Clement at the time did 2 tweet-ups, 45 minutes long, French and English, and took all the questions, gave a tweet a minute. So each one, 45 different tweets, all different question answers. So it was really, really cool. But then I asked myself, so why don't more people know about this thing? And so look across the country and we think about the digital economy. What's the first thing that comes to mind often? It's gaming. Right, the game studios that are across the country, every different region. We talked a little bit about the gamification and the importance of that. We look at financial systems. We all use ATMs, and so financial systems comes into mind as digital economy. Medical, increasingly, we're seeing the digitization of the medical community. We also see the education environment. Right? So more and more education. We hear about MOOCs and all those other types of environments. But I talked to a CIO of a construction company, and he let me know that there's a server in that white ACO trailer outside the construction site, so that electricians and plumbers can deconflict whether or not it's water or wiring that goes through the pipe. So electricians and plumbers are digitally enabled economy. I talked to the contract driller up in Fort McMurray, and they've got a server at the wellhead because they have a very dynamic HR environment. People move from site to site to site, 3,000 adds and deletions, 30,000 adds and deletions a year. So they need a server at the site so they can manage that. So the foreman at the contract drilling site, digital economy. Down the road, I had the chance to talk to an entrepreneur that's working with lobster fishermen here in the province. So in St. John, trapster.ca, putting a tablet into the fishing boats to allow them to understand where their pots are, understand the best routes between them so they can save on diesel fuel. And they can actually collaborate with one another so they understand the pricing model of things. Fishing, digital economy. Mining. There's a company up in Sudbury that builds robotic mining machines to keep people out of harm's way. So you can now control mining equipment from the surface of the mine. Now the interesting thing is that there's a company in Chile that's bought these mining machines. So in Santiago, Chile, they're mining from the surface of the mine down deep into the earth. But their view is not to be the best mining company in Chile. The view is to use those same individuals to mine back in Sudbury, to mine in Chibougamau, to mine anywhere around the world. And so it's important that we start to look at, not enabling the digital economy, but it's reimagining our economy digitally. This goes across all our communities, all our sectors, all our job functions. And if we're not prepared, then other people will likely step in and take advantage and take the opportunity. Now, when we look at how Canada's doing on the global sense, I like to use the Institute for Competitiveness and Prosperity. I always have to read it out because I switch the P and the C all the time. And they look at the most prosperous regions in North America, and they rank 16 of them. And 2 Canadian regions come out in that top 16. Ontario and Quebec are listed there. Anyone hazard a guess where Ontario and Quebec rank when it comes to prosperity in relationship to the most prosperous regions in North America? 14th and 16th. And so when they look at that, they say the prosperity gap is a productivity gap, and the productivity gap is an innovation gap. So we need to do more for innovation. It's important when we look at innovation that we consider innovation in all its forms. And I apologize, I'm speeding up. I got ahead of myself and now I'm catching up. That we look across innovation, not only that new to market item, it's that shiny widget, net new marketplaces. Wouldn't it be cool if all of a sudden Canada stood up and said, you know what, the Montreal Carbon Exchange is now the NASDAQ of carbon. Create a net new marketplace and then bring in those synergies across the community to help build out those business opportunities. So to look across that, look across new products, new solutions, as well as the opportunities from efficiencies across the board. When we look at the Canadian community, Canada's spiking. It's not just because there's a big building there in Toronto. We see it in Calgary, see it on Signal Hill, see it in Nunavut, see it here in Moncton, see a lot of innovation happening. See innovation happening across the country, and regardless of what 1 or 2 elected officials say, there's tremendous innovation that's happening across the country. And it's really cool because you can live where you love and you can project that know-how around the world. And so that's exciting times for us. So what are the opportunities? Well, I'm on the board of ICTC, and one of their key thrusts, research thrusts this year is looking at the mobile imperative. They believe that the mobile environment employs 410,000 people in Canada. Out of that, 80,000 are somewhat indirect, so supporting the structure, but 328 being more direct. I believe that will grow by another 10% by 2017. Across these different environments, wireless and networking, apps, social, cloud, device, mobile-enabled websites. When you look at the enhanced or the associated industry or the benefit to industry, they surveyed 400 companies, and they found that companies that adopted mobile technologies were more productive, they used resources more effectively, more energy efficient. And so you see that mobile technologies and this computing environment really helps then the broader economy. I threw this slide in quickly around BDC and looking at small business. So only 60% of small business plan to invest in technology, but when they do, 83% obtain a positive return. There's an Institute for the Study of Living Standards in Ottawa that suggests that Canadian business invests in technology at the 58% of what the U.S. invests in. And they tried to figure out what was the reason for that. And they felt that Canadian business, small business and otherwise, didn't have the background, the understanding, appreciation of technology to be able to invest in that, and they didn't understand the ROI. So how do you make the ROI case for that technology? So as we look to the opportunity, it's important that we recognize, hey, we love where we live. I love my neighborhood. I'm sure you all love your neighborhoods. Love our communities. Love the people that are around us. So we can live where we want to, but we can work around the world. So not only looking locally, but let's look around the world and project our know-how, project that knowledge. Because when we look at the growth opportunity, 1 to 2 billion new phones are going to be sold in the coming years. Those 1 to 2 billion phones are not going to be here in Canada. They're going to be in emerging nations. And it's important that we understand those business models that they have there. So looking at research and other analysis like Robert Newworth's and the Stealth of Nations, looking at the informal economies and seeing how that all works, is important for our entrepreneurs as they move forward. I'll just close on, so how can we help from a company perspective? Well, at Microsoft Research, we're proud that we have 800 researchers, PhDs working in computer science around the world on a variety of different computing topics. These researchers are incented like researchers at the university. So it's a publication-heavy emphasis that they have. I can't do matchmaking with these researchers. So I can't go and say, hey, you're working in quantum computing. I know 2 people in quantum computing. Why don't you talk and work together? What they do is they establish individual relationships with other researchers that are world-leading around the world. World-leading around the world, of course, world-leading around the world, world-leading. And when I did a research of the publications that are out there, Microsoft researchers have partnered with researchers across Canada, universities across the country, in jointly publishing papers. We've also done internships. We've also done awards and grants to help Canadian researchers. And so when we work with industry, we have our product groups. They're focused on, hey, today and tomorrow. And there's great opportunities with the product groups to work together and invent what's next. Microsoft Research is working 5 to 10 years out. And we also have Microsoft Labs and the Fuse Labs in the research areas that work together collaboratively with communities so that they can share their mindsets. And where it's really, really exciting is in these labs environments, they're really looking for the feedback, getting people to kick the tires and figure out where to go. You have that direct line to then find out where things are working and happening. We also have Research Connections, where we work with universities directly for internships, fellowships, grants, and helping share thoughts and insight into what's happening in the environment, providing free cloud services. So giving compute resources to academia and research to be able to connect up. We also have programs, as was mentioned earlier, DreamSpark, which provides free software tools from K-12 all the way up through higher ed. So there's no reason why any of the developers within your environment should ever have to pay for tool sets to develop. We also have Imagine Cup, which is our contest for 16-year and older youth to develop and compete for over $750,000 in prizes. So we have competitions in world citizenship, solving challenges that the world faces, innovation, games, user interface, Windows phones, apps, brain games, tools, across the board. And we're quite pleased that last year Sabo from University of Calgary had a noteworthy finish in some of the leaders out of Russia, and they won $10,000 as part of their reward for doing that. Do you leave the academic environment? BizSpark, which is a program to help startups. So free tools for startups, free cloud services for startups, plus mentorship and development. And New Brunswick's own Limbic software was brought into the cohort for our BizSpark 1 program, where we actually then bring them to senior vice presidents in the company, but also to Silicon Valley, to venture capital, so that we can mentor and share that information. So what you're seeing is this development of that direct personal relationship between the Microsoft people and developers throughout the careers. It's not that we simply put something on a web page like others. We're there. Our developers help, our guides, our mentors. We show up and are helping throughout that environment, all the way through to when you're building, your business. So commercialization, helping then market and promote that tool set. I'll just close on some of the cool tools that are out there that you might not have seen. .NET Gadgeteer for the Internet of Things. It's a small, pluggable compute environment. If you want to play with microcontrollers, the Internet of Things, .NET Gadgeteer allows you to do so with a consistent set of tools. Maybe you're into robotics. We have Robotics Studio, plug into the Mindstorms or other complicated robotics environments. We have the Lab of Things. We have Spark from a game community, Kodu from a younger community, Connect from a natural user interface. We have open source tool sets and open source repositories. 10 years ago, there was a little bit of friction between the commercial software community and the open source community. Well, that conversation has changed. So we're open for business. If you go to web.war.ca, you'll see how interoperable it is. If you want to run Drupal on top of Windows Cloud, not a problem. Bring it on in. Hadoop on top of Azure. Yeah, we do that. Right? So it's a different conversation, different world, and sharing these code pieces so that you can reuse them. So there you have, I've droned on before lunch. I've gone too fast at the second half of my presentation. But hopefully I've shared some things to capture your imagination. Hopefully you see that it's an exciting time. I know that myself, I get excited about this stuff and I start to stumble on my words, just because I think there's so much cool stuff happening. So it's an exciting time for technology, exciting time for business, exciting time for society, exciting time for Canada. I think there's opportunity here in Canada if we seize it. Let's continue to look locally, but also project that local knowledge around the world, because there's tons of opportunity there. And a lot of people take that Canada flag, that brand, in mind, and really look forward to the Canadian brand as they're looking in the marketplace and say, yeah, I want to buy Canadian. And then understand that industry, writ large, is there to help. So reach out. I know my colleagues from other industry partners are saying, yeah, we want to get in and help you as well, because they have programs that assist in this way as well.